All right. So, episode 1, Story Sage podcast / video series. We don't really have a technical term yet, but essentially I'm here with Russell Goetze with Ideal Energy / Green Squared Electric. He's a master electric, been in the field for 15 years.
Oh, no. Altogether, 25 to 26.
Dang.
Yeah.
Okay. So 25 to 26. So to say that you know a little bit about the electrical trade would be like an understatement. So.
There's a lot to learn, though.
Yeah, that's true.
It's as we may cover, the industry is very broad. So I could probably do this for 100 years and still have things to learn.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And then one of the cool things is you specialize basically in commercial solar, correct?
Exactly. Yeah, that's
awesome.
Correct.
So when did you start? Well, I guess what's the origin story of how you became an electrician?
As a 15 or 16-year-old teenager, I had a job working down the street from my parents. I wasn't thrilled with the work. And at Thanksgiving or Christmas, my cousin's husband had his own electrical contracting business out of Chaska, and I was kind of grumbling about my job. And he was like, "Why don't you come and work with me? I'll teach you the ropes of the trade." And he just kind of invited me to come and learn about the trade and work with him. And I was like, well, something's got to be better than this. So I went and started with him a little bit, and then he asked me to commit fully to it, to being like a summer helper that next May, June, as I was getting out of whatever year of high school that would have been for me. And I was like, gosh, no, I believe the words were like, I don't want to be a stupid electrician, or I don't want to be a dumb electrician, I think, is what the conversation around home was. And my parents was like, this is a great opportunity. You got to try it. God only knows what this might bring for you. True. So you got to give it a try. And it's only 3 months of your life. That was the phrase that I remember my parents saying, it's only 3 months of your life. Give it a shot. If you don't like it, at least you know for sure. So we went out and bought tools, because electricians are required to bring their own tools to work, or at least we were back then. And bought tools, set myself up, and I went to work for the first day and had a blast. I loved it. It was so awesome. And honestly, as I look past in my past 25 to 26 years from that date, the work has always been engaging and exciting. The mechanics of the work and the challenges of the code and all the compliance stuff that comes with the trade has always been really exciting and engaging for me. It's a wonderful trade. Any bad day that I ever had at work was usually because of people getting involved.
Yeah, I feel that.
People tend to do that. Maybe they don't always intend to do that, but it happens.
So you started at 16 doing it as a summer internship, basically.
Yeah, I was a summer helper.
Okay.
Apprentice. Yeah.
Gotcha. So you did that for then 2 years, and then you were graduated from high school, and then you went full time.
And then I actually went to trade school in Anoka Hennepin Tech.
Oh, okay.
And I went for 2 years to get the trade school part done. At that point, I knew there was 2 different ways to go. As some people just do on-the-job training.
Yep. Yeah, that's
and then
what I'm
they
most
can
familiar with. Yeah.
And then they'll do night school to prepare themselves for the big exam, the journeyman's exam. For me, I just knew that I wanted that foundational knowledge of the structural education, even though school wasn't for me. Mm-hmm. That was the other thing. I had a lot of people encourage me to go to college, and at the time that was a really hard thing for me to decide, because college presents a lot of opportunity for people in this country. But for me, I couldn't fathom the idea of sitting in a classroom for another 4 years.
Yeah, I remember.
I was done with school.
Yeah, and obviously a little bit of a generation gap, but even when I was in high school, it was if you didn't go to college, it was well, what are you going to do? It was presented as really the only option. People didn't even give trades a second thought, which is kind of ridiculous, because realistically right now, especially with AI just being the way that it is, trades are really your only safe jobs. A lot of the video
really
stuff that even
point.
we do
Yeah.
is getting, AI'd. So, and a lot of these coding jobs are, you can go on ChatGPT and you can just say, hey, write me code for this. So all these safe jobs that were originally going to be, hey, go to college, get a 4-year degree, aren't as safe as they used to be, where now the trade jobs, electrician, carpenter, plumber, XYZ, it's you can't really AI away something that requires 2 hands, at least not conveniently now.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So it's kind of silly. Just kind of looking back. So how'd you deal with the doubt? So you, like you were saying a little bit earlier, when you were thinking about it, it's I don't want to be a stupid electrician in high school.
Yeah.
How did you deal with those self-doubt looking back at it?
The people that I ended up working with at that shop at that time encouraged me a lot. And I'm not sure if I actually experienced a lot of doubt. It just, everything started coming together and it made sense. I also, due to some life circumstances at that point in my life, I just wanted to go out and start making some money and start, get my own house, start paying for my own stuff instead of like going deeper into debt.
Yeah.
And so I did go to trade school for 2 years. And when I was done with trade school, I just went to work and worked a lot. I had a lot of fun with it. I eventually rolled into having my own business. I got my journeyman's license, then my master's license, quickly started my own business and started doing my own electrical contracting stuff outside of my day job. I did a pretty good job, a really good job at not letting them conflict with each other. So I was able to do some stuff on the evenings and weekends with my own business and, have insurance, bond with the state, license, all of the stuff to do it legit, right?
Adult. Yeah.
And then worked really hard at my day job, and it was a good thing. It kind of helped me develop to be ready for other things to come later on with my career by experiencing dealing with people and contracts and collections and all that kind of stuff that comes along with having a contracting business.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think you had to wait until you had your master's before starting out on your own? Because I'm sure a lot of people are, the entrepreneur like vibe is super strong with younger generation now. So everybody wants to own their own thing. So do you think that you needed to have your master's before starting your own thing, or could you have started as a journeyman your own thing?
There are ways to do that, but the state's structure, we don't have to dig too deep into the way the state of Minnesota has things structured, but in order to have an electrical contractor's license and perform work for other people, you need to have a contractor's license with the state of Minnesota, a bond, proof of insurance that you're covered, and some other things that go along with that contractor's license. In order to hold that contractor's license, you have to have a responsible master. So if a journeyman wanted to do that, he would have to find a master to either be on his payroll, to be involved in the daily operations and do that. And I actually have an acquaintance from years ago who did operate his business that way. He may still actually. Haven't talked to him in a while, but he was a journeyman electrician. He started his own business, and then he just had a master of record sign on to be the master to hold that contractor's license. But as an apprentice electrician back in the day, or even as a journeyman without that contractor's license, it wasn't permissible by the state statutes for me to go do work for somebody else.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. Good background. So, okay. Well, what type of work did you do originally? Was it kind of like wiring house? Did you start in the commercial sector, agricultural? I'm not really sure all the subsectors in the electrical world.
I was really fortunate to kind of have a very broad, dynamic upbringing in the trade. Some people that I've talked to throughout the years have been like strictly doing like high-rise office, or strictly doing like gas stations, or strictly doing new residential, and that's it.
Yeah.
The person that introduced me to the trade and brought me into it, his team of electricians, like the whole company and crew, we did new homes, we did residential remodel, which is not like new homes because you're tearing something apart and trying to put something new back together out of it.
Yep.
Right? It's a whole different animal. We did commercial new construction and remodel. We did maintenance for some factories and some industrial stuff. Like, it was all over the place. And we even got into some agricultural stuff too.
Yeah. So it was very broad, which definitely like helps you learn much better, because if you're not going to the same thing every day, you need to know it on a more granular level. So,
it was something new every day, which throughout my years I've realized for myself is what I need. Some people like that repetitive, like, I'm going to go wire a house again. Like, they just know what they're doing and they know what to expect. And that fits some personalities. For me, I need something new and challenging and exciting all the time.
Awesome. So then when did the solar come in? Because I know solar is a little bit more of a repetitive task. I've seen like large solar farms go on, and it's very much like, and now you do the inverter, and now you do this wire, and so on and so forth.
Absolutely. So. It's kind of the same. Like, it's like a repeat story of my parents encouraging me to just try it.
Okay.
There became a period in 2016 where I knew that the work-life balance wasn't working for me. I had young kids, and I wanted to be a better dad and a better husband around home a little more, and not always working out as much as I was. So I was trying to figure out how to balance that out. And so I had a few conversations with some peers in the industry and learned that there might be some opportunity to use my master's license in a new way where I'm not the business owner. And so I kind of put some feelers out there. I probably had 6 to 8 introductions, and none of them really, they were all great introductions or great conversations, but none of them really like felt like the right one. And then one day I got a text from another electrical contractor who introduced me through this text to the owner of Ideal Energies. And it just said like name, company, he's looking for a master electrician to help build his solar business.
Yeah.
And I was like, solar? Really? That sounds dumb. Like at the time I didn't know anything about it. And then like 3 or 4 hours later, I looked back at the text and it was kind of like the same thing. And like, far be it from me to just like make that decision. You got to give it a shot, try it out. And like, God only knows what the opportunity could be on the other side of that, right? And so that was in 2016. I started with Ideal Energies and Green Squared Electric in 2017, early like January. And what are we in, 24? So it's been over 7 years, and it's like, solar, the installation part can be repetitive, but between like the utilities throughout the state of Minnesota that all have kind of their own TSM, their technical specifications for installation or connection, and code, and constantly changing technology between inverters and DC to DC power converters, or as Solar Edge calls them, optimizers, and panel technology and racking technology. And it's actually in the way that we approach solar, it's a constantly changing thing. What do they say? Constantly changing landscape. It's not actually the repetitive thing that you might associate with it, especially in the way that we do it. I think the big ground mount stuff that you see out there is definitely more repetitive because it's a larger scale. And it's kind of like, okay, stick posts in the ground 1,000 times, set panel 5,000 times, wire them together, 5,000 times. With rooftop solar, it's really complex, and that's what Ideal Energies is really specialized in, is rooftop solar in the state of Minnesota.
Yeah, that's sweet. So you do a lot of like ballasted systems then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Very, very few hard attached or even partially attached systems.
Gotcha.
Everything's rooftop ballasted. Yeah.
Okay. Sweet. Yeah, I've seen a couple ballasted. I've never sold or designed a ballasted.
Okay.
I have a lot of respect for it. I went out to Wisconsin, and there was a Renew Wisconsin, which is a really great nonprofit out there that helps with a lot of solar for school projects with the Couliard Solar Foundation.
Okay.
So we went to go film a bunch of solar on schools, and it was like, oh, this is what a ballasted system is. My old boss, when I was working solar, he was like, you're really lucky you skipped the installation phase where you bring all the bricks up to the roof and be that guy. I'm really glad I wasn't that dude. But that it is what it is. So
I think the carrying ballast thing is kind of like an old uncle of mine said that a shovel is a good tool because it builds character.
Yeah.
So maybe carrying ballast in the solar industry for at least a couple years builds character.
Yeah. It makes you appreciate what goes into it. So then when you're the guy that's like actually up there doing the electrical work, you're like, okay, I've earned this. So yeah. For sure. So when you were interviewing with a couple different companies, and the reason I bring this up is one of the really big things right now in the solar industry, and really through every industry throughout the U.S., is we have a huge trade labor shortage, right?
Yeah.
But there is folks out there like you who are switching from, hey, I was doing my own thing and now I want to go work for somebody else. And you were saying, hey, you interviewed with a couple different people, didn't really feel like the right fit, and then I met with Ideal and it just felt right, and then you ended up going forward with them. What were some of the green flags that you had with them and some of the red flags you had with other people, so that companies who are looking for folks like you can kind of go for the green flags and avoid the red flags?
Oh, wow. This is like specific to my own character, and hopefully it helps answer this question for other people. But as I grew up in the trade, I saw some of the people that I worked around with, even some of my own leaders, as an apprentice, take some shortcuts, whether it was in safety or even in like how you would install some wiring or apparatus in code compliance. And sometimes they would cut corners because it was faster, save money, whatever.
Yeah.
And that always bugged me because at my core, I want to do things right. I don't want to do things wrong. I feel like it's almost like stealing when you do things wrong. You promise somebody you're going to do something, and then if you don't do it right, you kind of in a way stole from them, right? Because they have expectation for things to be done a certain way. And as I met with these 6 to 8 other people, it constantly felt like it was like, hurry up and make as much as we can.
Yeah, I see that actually a lot. That's
It's very short-sighted.
Yeah, that's why a lot of Utah solar companies have a very bad rap. I've
heard that too.
Yeah. It's like all of them are like, hey, we'll sell everything by the phone and do a design online, and we'll hire somebody else out to come and install it, and they just like go for as many freaking sales as possible in the year. I'm sure that there are great companies out in Utah who do solar, but traditionally, at least from what I've heard, those is kind of where the problem is.
There's definitely some rumbling about that. So at my core, there was like that. It's got to fit. I got to feel like I know that I can do what's right every time instead of what's best for money.
Yeah.
And when I met with Chris Sihos, the owner of Ideal Energies, and we had our first like conversation, it was supposed to be like a half hour to hour, just kind of like, hey, what's going on? What do you want to do? I think it was like 4 hours later, we actually finally said like, well, we'll talk again maybe. And but throughout that, I learned that he's forward thinking on like risk mitigation and following rules. We don't void warranties. Like I knew that at least in this place versus some of the other places that I had spoke to people about opportunity, I knew that if I saw a potential problem, that I was gonna be empowered to speak up and bring forward concerns, and say like, hey, I think this is how we need to do it in order to do it right. And throughout my years here, I've actually learned that does work. And I think, so that's my own experience. To answer to somebody else that might be interviewing with companies and trying to find the right fit, like, where do I want to work if I'm just starting out in this trade? Look at yourself and look at your morals and your goals, and make sure that company is going to help get you at least somewhat towards your goals and allow you to stick true to your morals. I think those are the two most important things as people in any industry. Is you want to do what feels right. And for different industries, right feels different. Mm-hmm. And then, like, what are your goals personally and career-wise? Like, you probably want a fair wage. You probably want benefits that are going to take care of some things around you at home. One thing that I mentioned earlier when I got introduced to the trade is I was supposed to come together with like my own list of tools that I bring from home. When I came to this company, the owner's decision immediately was like, well, we're not going to tell people that they need to spend their own money to go buy tools to then just bring them to work and wear them out for us. We're just going to provide them everything that they want.
Well, that's nice. Yeah.
And so, like, as somebody's considering where they want to work in this industry, think about things that matter to you. I've met electricians who are like, keep those tools. I got my own stuff and I'm really proud of it because I like my stuff better. And so then that benefits that we provide might not be as valuable to that person, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I think it's really like finding the right fit for each person, but you need to look at what's important to you and see if that company aligns with that.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, that's good advice. Would you suggest for somebody fresh out, just starting out, would you suggest if they did want to go into solar, to start with a generalist company, kind of like how you did first, or start just immediately in solar?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think you learn a lot in like wiring houses and doing like office tenant build outs and like kind of like the typical like historical part of the electrical industry. I think there's a lot of things and like there's a lot of character and traits and skills that get developed out of that work that then can be applied to the solar. Versus if you start in solar, you're only going to learn solar, and you may only learn paneling or panel installation, and that might be it. Kind of like the electricians that I met years ago who only wired houses or who only did office buildings. I met electricians who for like 2 years, all they did is set 2x4 troffer lights in ceilings.
Yeah.
And then do another one. And they do like 30 a day and 30 a day or whatever their goal was. But and I worked with an electrician one time who came from roughing in houses for his entire, he had more years of experience than me. Yeah. And we went to go to this industrial plant out in Chaska to install a bunch of lighting underneath the mezzanine. And I gave him a 1/2-inch bender and a stack of 1/2-inch conduit and a cart with a bunch of stuff to start piping out a bunch of lights. Like, here's your plan. Like, you got more experience than me. Like, I don't know what you need from me, but like, go for it. And he's like, well, actually, yeah, I might have more years of experience than you, but I've never bent pipe except for in trade school back in the day. And that's like, for him, that was like 10 years ago or 15 years ago. Like, oh, okay, well, let's get to work and we'll teach you some things.
So do you feel like that's maybe a potential error or something that could be improved within just the electrical trade in general, is like almost you need sub-specializations like under your journeymans? So like rather than just being like, oh, I graduated with a degree in biology, it's like, okay, I graduated with a degree in biology with a focus on behavioral science or whatever. It should almost be like, oh, I have my journeymans, but I have a specialization accreditation in hanging lights or something like that.
Oh, that's a tough one, because I think at a certain point we have to leave people have the personal choice. So if somebody wants to be broad in their experience or skill set in the electrical trade, then it's up to them to jump shops and find some avenue, whether it's a shop that a company that's very dynamic in their work and covers a lot of things like I was introduced, or if they like work for a residential shop and then a commercial shop and then an industrial shop and then a solar shop, and they personally and like with intention build that out. But I think if we were to implement some type of like new standard for the industry, that might not fit for people that only want to stay in one, and it might not fit for people that want to be broad. So I think probably the way that things are now, it's dynamic enough where people can get that if they want, but it's also kind of like up to that whole personal choice, where if somebody wants to be just an residential electrician, with home technology and like all like smart homes and all of the things that we have with today compared to like 15 years ago. Yeah, residential wiring of houses is way more complex than it was 15 years ago.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So I don't think that like staying in one portion of the trade and one like subset of the trade is bad in any way.
Okay. Good. So I guess you've probably also seen a lot of people come and go within the trade, for sure. Inevitably, it's the same thing in the video production world. We see people who come out of college and like, oh, I'm going to be a filmmaker. And it's like, sweet, now I need you to carry sandbags for a year. And then it goes away. So I'm sure it's probably similar in the electrical world too. So for folks who are interested in stepping a foot into the electrical trade, what's some advice that you can be like, hey, these are the qualities or the things that I've seen that allow you to stick around?
Drive. Like, somebody has to be driven to problem solve. They want to enjoy the problem solving aspect of like looking at a plan set and laying out a space, or finding a way to make fixtures hit spots that are getting the even light distribution without the conflict of like heating vents that are in the way, or sprinkler for fire protection. There's all kinds of things that can conflict with a lighting layout or a receptacle layout, and you might say like receptacle here, but there's a heating vent that goes through the wall. Well, solving those problems, and somebody that just like gives up and goes to their journeyman and is like, hey, this doesn't fit, versus going back to their journeyman and saying, hey, this doesn't fit, but I have these two options. Which would you like me to do? Like doing the problem solving thing and going to your superiors with solutions to the problem, instead of just like, this doesn't work. Yeah. That's one trait. The way that I describe it, I don't know what you necessarily call it other than being driven to problem solve.
Yeah.
I enjoyed math as a kid. And I get to do a lot of math as an electrician. Some people are surprised that there's as much math that happens as an electrician. There's some electricians that don't need math as much, and they probably enjoy that part of their work more than I would enjoy that part of that work. I enjoy the challenges of problem solving and math. Back to the core of the question: what kind of traits will help somebody succeed? You have to be driven to problem solve. You really do. And it's a lot of hard work sometimes too.
Yeah. I think people, I don't know, maybe people are a little scareder of harder work than they used to be, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just getting old too. So we were just at Clean Energy Business Day, Lizzie and I. She was photoing, I was videoing. It was actually a super cool experience. But one of the things that's extremely frustrating, at least in my eyes, having kind of been in the whole gamut where I'm the guy that's sweating behind a camera running around, so kind of trade-ish work, and then also a guy that has to throw on the occasional suit, as awkward as I may be, and have to like go and like negotiate contracts. You know, there's all the folks within Mincia, and they do great things, but most of them are suit people. You know, we don't have a lot of trade people represented within Mincia, and I know they represent the business entities, but it would be nice to have more folks who are actually doing the installation, not necessarily just the design work or the business contract work. So from a person who's actually out there installing it, what are some things that you feel like, hey, this is a huge roadblock that we really need fixed or could drastically improve the industry as a whole?
A couple things that I've seen, if I was to like kind of pinch to zoom out and look at the whole industry, and this is Minnesota alone, because we've done no solar installation outside of Minnesota, so I'm only aware of what's happening in Minnesota for the most part.
Totally okay.
A couple things would be like, we've seen some wiring methods be approved by inspectors that we would never use because they're not approvable. I think it just got kind of glanced over. So, and then we've also seen some installations that happen on rooftops that are a structural engineering component of the industry or of our business, has said like that roof isn't good. It won't hold the weight of the solar. But then somebody else, some other entity will come in and do it. So I think between that, and then there's also been, I've heard some feedback from some utilities personnel and even some inspectors that I work with. I get along with inspectors great.
That's surprising.
And
well, it's a good sign that you're good at what you do.
Yeah, I have probably 25 inspectors if I sat down and went through a list where I could say we have really good conversations, either about code or even just life stuff when we meet. It's
nice.
Wonderful. So there's a little bit of it, I think, a breakdown in some standards on using the right products, and then the structural component. And then I've even heard some feedback from inspectors and from utilities representatives, where there's some solar installers out there in the state of Minnesota that are putting people out there that aren't experienced, qualified, or trained well. And so that brings me back to like two things: education and standards throughout the state that kind of like even out the playing field. Each utility has kind of their own technical standards manual for solar interconnection. And that makes it challenging for installers or developers to meet each utility's requirements when there's like, I don't even know how many utilities throughout the state of Minnesota, but the National Electrical Code is adopted by the state and applied almost equally throughout the entire state. That's easy. I can go to that code book and read the same thing every time and know that if I follow that code, subject to the authorities having jurisdiction's opinion or interpretation of the code, I generally can meet that almost every time without any like challenge or like, oh, we don't like that, let's do it this way instead. Like, it's pretty straightforward. And if somehow the utilities technical standards for interconnection were to kind of mesh together and be more standard or uniform across the state, that would help the industry operate more efficiently, because you spend less time going back and forth with each utility to try and meet their requirements. As I say that, we've got great relationships with almost every utility that we've worked with. So it's not like it's a problem for us, but I do feel that because it can be a little bit dynamic on like what their rules are, I feel like that makes it challenging for the industry in other aspects.
Definitely.
And so like leveling the playing field with like standards that are equal across the state would help. That might not be possible because every utility has their own kind of a unique customer load base that they have to worry about. And each utility is trying to provide reliable power based on that load dynamic, or that load characteristic, I guess you would say. So it might not be possible to do that. But I think that's one thing, is to make things more straightforward across like uniform, I guess is what the word I use. And then the other thing is education. I think that there's some inspectors that I've talked to that would like more education on the solar part so that they know what they're inspecting. I think there's a lot of installers and developers and designers and engineers who approach it to the best that they can, but if we had more education.
Have you, and I'm not super familiar, so yeah, I'm just not super familiar, but have you ever looked into like NABCEP training? Like, is that something that Ideal requires of their installers?
Have 3 people, I think, that are NABCEP trained, maybe 2 and 2 more that are working on it.
Yeah.
I haven't personally looked into it myself yet.
Yeah,
I've been pretty busy.
Yeah, fair. I've looked into it a little bit. And the only reason being is I had a couple friends that asked me, because I was, at the time when I was designing and selling, they're like, well, hey, I'm really interested in getting into solar. I really like what you do. What would you suggest? I'm having a hard time getting a job. And I always told them, oh, go get your NABCEP's associates, because basically I don't remember exactly the class length, but you take that, take the test, and it's all pretty easy. Like, you can get that done maybe 4 weeks if I remember right. And then it's like, hey, now I have a certificate that I can go to employers and be like, hey, I've taken that first step.
Yeah.
Which helps. The problem that I've heard from other folks who have been been in the industry a little longer and has done the NABCEP is some of the stuff is outdated. Like, rapid shutdown, which I know that it sounds like there's just a recent revision of all that, but essentially this was 4 years ago now, so again, dating myself, but that wasn't even part of NABCEP training, was the rapid shutdown. So they're like, oh, just throw a string inverter on a roof and it'll be fine. And it's like, well, you can't necessarily do that anymore.
Yeah.
So that was an issue too, but it's been a while, so I don't want to throw any shade at NABCEP, but I know that is an educational option for some folks, but I don't know about for inspectors, but from the solar perspective, that could potentially be an option. So
yeah, I think the NABCEP thing is probably good for especially people that are just getting into the industry too. The person that is the NABCEP like trained person within our business shared some of the things as he went through that training program, and I don't remember which accreditation of the NABCEP
there's a couple
he has, but they covered some electrical safety things. They covered some different voltage characteristics, like delta versus Y connected power sources, and then the different voltages of like single phase, 3-phase.
Well, that's good. So at least coming in something. Yeah.
480, 277, things like that. So there were some good things that I think was included that kind of at least laid the foundation.
Okay.
Didn't build out the whole thing, but there's some good foundational stuff that was included. So I think that's a worthwhile thing. Okay.
The other one I know for education that may be useful is MREA. Not sure how familiar with them. They're out in Wisconsin.
Okay.
So yeah, they're Wisconsin, but they're Midwest Renewable Energy Association, and they're kind of more from like the consumer's perspective, but they've started to dabble more into the installer perspective and like trying to educate installers on how to install solar better. Okay. And I know they've just recently revamped, I guess is maybe the technical term, all their educational stuff for this year. So that could be a good resource for folks out there who are just trying to learn something before going into an interview and being like, yeah, solar, it makes energy. So
absolutely. Yeah. Okay. The other entity in Minnesota that we've partnered with is the Electrical Association. It used to be, I think, the Minnesota Electrical Association. A few years ago, they rebranded as Electrical Association.
Okay.
They partner with contractors. They provide educational resources. I think they may be working on a solar-specific course. We actually partner with them and provide that educational element to all of our unlicensed electrical workers. And they take class I think it's Tuesday. They can go, I think, to it or participate at home virtually. Yeah. And it's like a structured thing that happens 40 weeks out of the year, kind of like a school year. And
that'd be kind of
it's a training program that is just part of what we provide to them. And the feedback that I get from the people that are participating in that is pretty good.
Maybe I should get to
that. And it's a 4-year deal too.
Yeah.
So year one, ideally, year one, you're getting some of the ground foundational things. Year 2, you get next level, 3, 4, and by the time you pass through all 4, you should be prepared for the journeyman's exam.
Nice.
So it's kind of nice, especially for our electricians that start out like early on in their electrical career as an apprentice. They get to kind of go through that whole program, and by the time they've got the hours completed to be ready to take the exam, they've also completed a coursework that gets them prepared for the exam as well.
Yeah, because it's one thing just doing it in the field, and then another having to get behind and like read a technical question and then answer it. So having the coursework component would be nice too. So do you think that could be in supplement of going to trade school? Like if you just want to come out of high school, go directly into it, start working, and then take that in the evenings? Or do you think
Absolutely. For the right person. It wouldn't have worked for me. I needed to go to trade school for 2 years. I had to. There was no doubt for me, especially looking back, that was the right thing for me. But for a lot of people that want to just get out there and work, and they want to do some schooling and sprinkle it out across 4 years to prepare them and get like that information built in, I think the one benefit there compared to my story is they're getting some schooling while they're working, where I had to put work aside and just go to school. Yeah,
which can be financially tough for some folks. So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think you got to look at your own situation, figure out what's best for you. But there's the beauty of it is there's options for people to get into the trade.
Definitely. Okay, I guess kind of looking a little forward, where do you see the future of the electrical trade going? And that's very broad, and I know.
It's very broad. Yeah. But, I mean, if you look at the technology that we've seen come in over the last few years, you hear people's aspirations for a mass conversion to EVs based on some information that I have from the industry. I think that's going to go slower than what some people anticipate.
Yeah.
But if you look at where the whole world is going with renewables and carbon footprint and electric vehicles and all kinds of other things, there's no doubt in my mind, even if EVs somehow go by the wayside and we go like to
hydrogen,
I still think that there's a lot of opportunity for electrical workers to make a great living, enjoy their trade, be challenged either technically or physically, however you want. Like you could go both ways. One thing that I've seen in Australia and in a local city here in Minnesota is the installation of renewables partnered with electrolyzers to create the hydrogen that would then potentially be used for hydrogen fuel cells.
That makes sense.
So some of that technology is starting to roll out before we even are going to really see the benefits of it. So there's a lot of like new things happening where I think it's only going to become more exciting for somebody that's a little bit nerdy when it comes to the trade. Like I really, really enjoy the stuff. Some of my coworkers even tease me a little bit, but like I like what I do. So
it's okay. Dude, I'm a huge nerd. So we have to be a nerd in order for us to show up and like talk about the electrical trade on a podcast. So like, don't worry, you're in good company. So. Batteries, do you guys see a lot of battery work on the commercial sector for like trying to shave demand and stuff like that? Or is battery still kind of early adoption for a lot of your commercial installations?
Boy, I've seen in some of my trade things that I read, publications and stuff like that, I see it coming, but I see it more either at the utility scale level or California.
Yeah,
I haven't seen much here in Minnesota. However, my exposure is commercial industrial market.
Yeah,
I have talked to some people in the industry that have done like a Tesla Powerwall here in Minnesota. I don't know much about that.
Yeah, I can see at least my personal perspective, which by no means is correct, but like the residential batteries I think is great. It's essentially having a generator at your home, which, with power being the way it is, it's great to have that at home. But from a commercial perspective, at least when I've looked at the numbers for folks, like if you can peak shave, your demand charge by, X percentage, like that can save thousands and thousands on your electrical bill. So like we've talked to people who are specifically installing on like, I don't know, I talked to maybe like a die caster. Okay. So they have all their electrical start in the morning, boom. And that's like where the majority of their electrical bill comes from.
Right.
So then they'll install a battery specifically just for that 10 minutes in the day, just to peak shave a little bit.
Right.
So I see it making sense, but it doesn't sound like, at least as of yet, that you've seen a lot of commercial is installing batteries.
I haven't seen it yet, but I think the opportunity is there with if prices come down in the equipment and the batteries, And if the incentives are there, and I really think the incentives probably have to come from the utility.
Okay.
They charge for demand. If somehow they were to offer back enough credit for correcting that demand, like your die caster, when they start up in the morning, the sun isn't always there in the morning.
Yeah.
So like there you could pair renewables with battery. So like later in the day you charge the batteries so that in the morning when the sun isn't there, you can do that peak shave with the batteries. But if you pair it with renewables, then it's kind of like covering both.
Yeah. Does the wiring, one of the things that always scares me when I look at a design is, okay, you can design a solar array in a variety of ways, but one of the problems that, at least when I was designing, is if I design it a certain way, that makes it much more difficult for you in the future to add a battery. Is that kind of the case too in commercial, where it's like you need to design it from day one to be battery compliant or battery accessible, or is it still pretty flexible to a degree in the commercial space?
Oh, definitely not accessible, or definitely not flexible. And it's simply because with every interconnection, the utility has to approve that. So there's like an interconnection application number that's associated with that, and it's specific to that design. So if you want to modify that, I don't even know how utilities allow you to modify it. Generally, it's another interconnection. So if I interconnect solar today, and next year I interconnect another solar or wind or battery, it's a whole nother thing that generally requires possibly another interconnection, engineered documents, approval, depending on the application, maybe its own production meter.
So it does change the wiring though pretty substantially. Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of its own separate project.
Gotcha. Okay. So if, say, there's a savvy commercial business owner out there who's like, hey, I don't want to drop $1 million, which by no means is this. Well, actually, I don't know how much those commercial solars are. But say they don't want to drop enough money to also buy a battery on day one. Is there things that you can do in the installation process from your knowledge to say, hey, I'm not going to do the battery now, but in the future we will do a battery that will make life easier?
Possibly.
Okay.
Every building is kind of its own snowflake. Okay. As one of our team members describes, even our own projects as like a 40 kW project here and a 40 kW project at this other place. They're two separate snowflakes.
Yeah. Okay.
And so to answer your question, it's a case by case scenario. Some facilities might offer that where it's like, well, if we're installing solar now, and we want to prepare for battery, let's do this extra thing so later on we don't have to, shut down the building or go so deep into the switchgear to prepare that space. So there's some preparatory work that could be done when you're designing the switchgear for project A to prepare for project B.
Okay. All right. Kind of looking back at the shortage a little bit, what, from a person who actually is doing the work, what are some things that maybe government entities can do, companies can do, broadly, what are some things that we can do to try to fix the electrical shortage? Like, how can we get more people to be electricians?
More people? I really think that part of that could be related to cultural and social things where with technology, people are inherently maybe adverse to doing labor for work.
Yeah.
Just because of where we're at today. I look at some of our youth. Like there's some young kids today that I see are really ambitious and willing to grab a shovel or a lawnmower for any reason. Mm-hmm. But not as many as I remember when I was a kid.
Yeah, it's a little different. It's like, oh, I could go grab a shovel and I could work, or I could get behind a computer, sit all day, and I could work. And some people prefer one over the other. So.
Yeah, I think it's a mindset too. I've met people who've told me that they would take half as much money for an easier job where they can check their social media all day, where, fewer people for me have said like, oh, I'd put my phone down for 5 hours and just get behind a shovel or a saw or build a wall or run conduit or whatever the task might be. I think that there's definitely a cultural thing there with where we've come to as a people.
Yeah. So for me, from my monkey brain perspective, as somebody who's never had to balance these things, but I always go back to the theory of just like supply and demand, right? Yeah. So if there's a high demand, like couldn't and I don't know exactly how unions work, but like if all of a sudden we started paying the trades way more, like would that fix the issue theoretically, hypothetically?
Possibly, I think,
Okay.
but it depends on the person.
Yeah.
You know, so I've had some people say like they would take half as much money or half as much pay to have less demand and more convenience for them to do kind of what they want. So, but I think there are enough people out there who are driven to, you know, kind of hit that higher earning mark.
Yeah.
That could be a solution.
Okay.
But then if you raise the labor costs, how's the consumer gonna respond to the need for their electrical installations?
Yeah.
I can't predict that, but then
Fair
I think
enough.
there's like a reaction to everything that we could potentially do.
Yeah. Unfortunately, neither of us have to do those economic things. So, all right. Hey, that's kind of everything I have, at least off the top of my brain. I guess any last remarks on anything that you would recommend, young guy, young gal out there interested in becoming an electrician, what would be your final things to say?
Well, we're here through our connection through Mencia. Definitely, there's a lot of opportunity in the solar industry. But like as I think about it, I mean, I've talked about some of the facets that I've experienced. Like, there's residential, there's remodel, there's new construction, there's gas stations, hospitals, there's power plants. I mean, I even know electricians that just do security and alarm or audio video. That's all they do is just AV equipment installations. And there's even fire alarm installations. Like, it's so broad that if somebody just gives it a shot, like that's what I did. I went and tried it as a summer helper before I actually committed to trade school and went down that path. For the younger people, that's totally possible. You can just be a summer helper and try it out. For somebody that's like more midlife, like my age, trying to make a career transition, you really got to do some research and figure out how to make sure it's the right fit. But I don't think that the electrical trade is age discriminatory at all. I think there's a lot of places somebody can go in this trade. I mean, I work with 10 plus electricians, depending on the time of the year. We ebb and flow up to many more than that through partners. Some people just install solar racking. There's a couple electricians that I work with that strictly do site visits. They're electricians, and all they do is go out and measure equipment, put on their PPE to take photos and document what we're trying to connect to, and they're barely doing like electrical work with the tools as I would describe it, but they're taking pictures with their iPad and taking measurements and designing like conceptual stuff on photos so that the engineers can actually create drawings. There's so many different things that people can do in the electrical trade, between doing the work, project management, collecting information, to actually like installing or just like carrying ballast.
Yeah.
If that's your thing, you could be an electrician that carries ballast. So
Guy
like,
that carries rocks. Yeah.
there's a lot of opportunity. It's pretty awesome.
Well, awesome. Well, hey, thank you very much. Hopefully somebody out there finds some value from this. We can get some more people into the trade and more solar can be installed.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thanks, Russell.
Thanks for having me.